a human astrophysicist and a mysterious warrior, discover that cosmic moths consuming starlight across the galaxy are actually antibodies sent by an ancient galactic guardian, leading to humanity's first contact with a vast cosmic ecosystem and their acceptance into a galactic community. The first sign wasn't the darkness that swallowed the Outer Rim colonies. It wasn't the desperate transmissions that cut to static mid-sentence, or even the refugee ships that arrived with their hulls scarred by something that left patterns like bite marks in reinforced titanium. The first sign was Zara Chen standing in the observation deck of the research station Meridian, watching a star die wrong. She had seen stellar collapse before. Every astrophysicist had the predictable dance of nuclear fusion failing, gravity winning, the spectacular death throes of a sun that had burned for billions of years. But this star, catalogued as HD 47829, wasn't collapsing, it was being consumed. The light wasn't exploding outward in a supernova's final glory or collapsing inward in a neutron star's birth. It was being eaten, drawn away in streams of luminous matter that spiraled into something that shouldn't exist. The creatures were beautiful in the way that predators often are. Zara had named them the umbral moths when she first detected them on the deep space sensors, though she knew the designation was inadequate. They moved through the vacuum of space with wings that spanned kilometers, gossamer membranes that caught and channeled light like solar sails made of living darkness. Their bodies were sleek, insectoid, but scaled to astronomical proportions. Each one was larger than Earth's moon, and they moved in swarms that numbered in the thousands. They had appeared at the edge of known space 3 months ago, emerging from the galactic void between spiral arms. The initial reports had been dismissed as sensor errors or hoaxes. Space was vast and hostile, but it was also predictable. It followed rules. The umbral moths followed no rules that human science understood. Zara pressed her palm against the reinforced viewport, watching the dying star's light fade to a dim orange ember. The moths circled it like vultures, their wings creating interference patterns that bent starlight into impossible geometries. She had been studying them for weeks, trying to understand their biology, their purpose, their origin. What she had discovered kept her awake at night, staring at the ceiling of her quarters while her mind raced through calculations that always led to the same terrifying conclusion. The moths weren't just consuming light, they were consuming the fundamental forces that held reality together. Each star they drained weakened the fabric of space-time in that region. The universe was vast, but it wasn't infinite. If the moths continued their feeding, if they reached the core systems where billions of stars burned bright and close together, the cascading collapse would unravel everything. Behind her, the station's communication array crackled to life. "Commander," Marcus Rivera's voice cut through the static, tight with controlled urgency. "All department heads to the command center. Priority Alpha. We have a situation." Zara didn't need to ask what kind of situation. She had been tracking the moths' movement patterns, plotting their trajectory through the galaxy. They were accelerating, drawn by some cosmic instinct toward the densest concentrations of stellar matter. The core systems, Earth's system, home to 12 billion souls who had no idea that their sun was now a target for creatures that treated starlight as food. The command center buzzed with activity when she arrived. Rivera stood at the central display, his weathered face illuminated by the tactical hologram that showed the moths' advance. Red dots marked their confirmed positions, spreading like a cancer through the Outer Rim territories. Yellow zones indicated systems that had gone dark, their stars reduced to cold, lifeless husks. "They're moving faster than our projections indicated," Rivera said, without preamble. "The swarm that hit the Kepler system yesterday finished feeding in 14 hours. Previous attacks took 3 days minimum. They're becoming more efficient." Dr. Elena Baskus, the station's xenobiologist, looked up from her datapad. "Or more desperate, I've been analyzing the energy signatures from the consumed stars. The light they're extracting isn't just being absorbed, it's being converted into something else. Some kind of exotic matter that our instruments can't properly detect." "Converted for what purpose?" Rivera asked. "That's what we need to find out," Zara said, joining the group around the display. "I've been tracking their movement patterns, and there's a logic to their feeding behavior. They're not randomly consuming stars. They're following specific routes, targeting systems with particular spectral characteristics. They're looking for something." The room fell silent. Rivera's expression darkened. "Or someone." The transmission from Admiral Catherine Hayes arrived 6 hours later, broadcast on emergency frequencies to every human outpost in the galaxy. The message was brief, professional, and carried the weight of a species' survival. The Earth Defense Coalition was mobilizing every available resource: military vessels, research ships, mining platforms, even civilian transports were being pressed into service. Humanity's response to the umbral moths would be swift, decisive, and probably futile. Zara had run the numbers. The moths' energy output was measured in the same units used for entire star systems. Their wings generated electromagnetic fields that could disrupt fusion reactions from thousands of kilometers away. They moved through space at a significant fraction of light speed, ignoring the laws of physics that constrained human technology. Even the Coalition's most advanced warships were built to fight other humans, not cosmic predators that fed on the fundamental forces of the universe. But there was something else in the Admiral's message, buried beneath the military jargon and strategic assessments. A name: Marcus Kellerman, the ghost of Titan Station. Zara knew the stories, though she had never believed them. Kellerman had been a Coalition Marine, decorated for actions during the Proxima Rebellion. But the official records were sanitized, clinical. The stories told in bars and mess holes across the galaxy were different. They spoke of impossible odds, of one man holding off an entire enemy fleet while civilian transports escaped to safety. They spoke of someone who had stared into the abyss and emerged not just alive, but transformed. The official record stated that Marcus Kellerman had died during the final battle of the rebellion, his ship destroyed while ramming an enemy dreadnought. The unofficial record suggested that he had simply disappeared, vanishing into the outer rim territories where the galaxy's edges blurred into the cosmic void. Some said he had gone mad. Others claimed he had found something out there in the darkness, something that had changed him in ways that human science couldn't explain. Admiral Hayes' message indicated that Marcus Kellerman was not only alive, but that he was humanity's best hope against a threat that conventional weapons couldn't touch. The Coalition had been tracking him for months, following rumors and reports from the frontier worlds. He had been moving through the outer rim territories, always one step ahead of the moths, always in the right place at the right time to help evacuate civilians before the swarms arrived. But now the Coalition needed more than evacuation assistance. They needed a weapon. And somehow, Marcus Kellerman had become that weapon. The rendezvous point was a dead system, 30 light-years from Earth, a collection of frozen planets orbiting a white dwarf star that had exhausted its nuclear fuel years ago. The Coalition task force that gathered there was impressive by human standards: 3 heavy cruisers, a dozen frigates, and twice as many support vessels. Admiral Hayes commanded from the flagship, indomitable, her weathered face reflected in the bridge's tactical displays as she watched the outer system sensors for any sign of their mysterious ally. Marcus Kellerman's ship appeared without warning, dropping out of hyperspace with the kind of precision that suggested either exceptional skill or technology that surpassed anything in the Coalition's inventory. The vessel itself was like nothing in the official databases, a sleek predator of dark metal and energy that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It moved with fluid grace, ignoring the laws of inertia as it approached the task force. Admiral Hayes, the voice that came over the communication channel, was calm, measured, carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much and survived anyway. I received your message. I assume you have questions about our enemies. More than questions, Colonel Kellerman, Hayes replied. I have a species to save. Intel suggests you've been fighting these creatures for months. We need to know how to kill them. There was a pause, long enough for the crew of the Indomitable to exchange glances. When Kellerman spoke again, his voice carried a note of something that might have been sadness. You can't kill them, Admiral. Not with conventional weapons. Not with anything in your arsenal. The moths aren't just creatures. They're symptoms of something much larger. Something that's been hunting across the galaxy for longer than human civilization has existed. Then what do you propose? That we stop thinking like humans and start thinking like them. The moths aren't mindless predators. They're sophisticated, intelligent, and they're looking for something specific. Something that's been calling to them from the galactic core. If we can understand what that is, we might be able to stop them before they reach the core systems. Admiral Hayes leaned forward in her command chair. And you know what they're looking for? I have theories, but they require verification. And that means getting close enough to a feeding swarm to take detailed measurements, close enough to touch them. The briefing that followed was unlike anything in Coalition military history. Kellerman's data painted a picture of the moths that was both fascinating and terrifying. They were not native to this galaxy, having originated in the vast emptiness between spiral arms. They had been traveling for millions of years, following signals that emanated from the galactic core. signals that had been growing stronger over the past several millennia. The signals are artificial, Kellerman explained, his holographic image flickering slightly as it was transmitted from his ship. Someone or something has been broadcasting into the void, calling the moths home. The question is who, and why? Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the briefing room. You're suggesting that someone summoned these creatures, that this is an intentional attack? I'm suggesting that the universe is larger and more complex than we understand. The moths are powerful, but they're not the apex predators in this cosmic ecosystem. They're being used. The mission parameters were simple in concept, suicidal in execution. A small team would approach an active feeding site, gathering data on the moth's biology and behavior while they consumed a star. The information would be transmitted back to the task force, where scientists would attempt to develop countermeasures. If the team was discovered, they would likely be vaporized before they could send a distress signal. Kellerman's ship, designated as the Shadow Runner in the mission files, would serve as the primary reconnaissance vessel. Its advanced stealth systems and exotic matter hull could theoretically avoid detection by the moth's electromagnetic sensors. Zara had volunteered to accompany the mission, arguing that her expertise in stellar physics would be crucial for understanding the feeding process. Admiral Hayes had been reluctant to approve the assignment. Dr. Chen, you're one of our best astrophysicists. We can't afford to lose you on a reconnaissance mission. With respect, Admiral, you can't afford not to understand what we're fighting. The moths aren't just consuming light, they're consuming the fundamental structure of reality. If we don't figure out how to stop them, there won't be an astrophysics department left to staff. The Shadow Runner's interior was as unusual as its exterior. The corridors were lined with some kind of material that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. The walls felt warm to the touch, almost alive. Kellerman explained that the ship had been constructed using technology salvaged from across the galaxy, combined with techniques that he had learned during his years in the Outer Rim territories. The hull is grown, not built, he said as he led Zara through the ship's cramped passages. It's a hybrid of organic and synthetic materials that can adapt to different environments. The moth's electromagnetic sensors can't detect it because it doesn't register as artificial technology. Where did you learn to build something like this? Kellerman paused at the entrance to the ship's observation deck, his expression unreadable. From the previous victims, the moths aren't the first cosmic predators to threaten galactic civilization. They're just the most recent. The galaxy is full of ruins left by species that thought they were the dominant life form. I've spent the past 5 years studying those ruins, learning from their mistakes. The observation deck was a sphere of transparent material that provided a 360-degree view of space. As the Shadow Runner approached the target system, Zara could see the moths in their natural habitat for the first time. They were magnificent and terrible, their kilometer-wide wings creating interference patterns that bent starlight into rainbow cascades. The star they were feeding on had dimmed to a dull red ember, its nuclear fire slowly dying as the moths drained its energy. How many are there? Zara whispered. 3,000 in this swarm, Kellerman replied. Medium-sized by their standards, the largest swarms number in the tens of thousands. They're not just feeding randomly. Watch their movement patterns. Zara studied the moth's behavior, noting how they moved in coordinated formations around the dying star. It wasn't chaotic feeding, it was organized, purposeful. They're creating some kind of resonance pattern. The way they're positioned, they're amplifying each other's energy absorption. Exactly. They're not just consuming the star's light, they're using it to charge something. Something that requires massive amounts of energy to activate. The Shadow Runner's sensors detected the energy buildup first. Deep within the swarm, at the precise center of the moth's formation, space itself was beginning to warp. The starlight being consumed wasn't disappearing, it was being converted into exotic matter and channeled into a focal point that was becoming increasingly unstable. It's a gateway, Zara breathed. They're opening a pathway through space-time to where the galactic core. They're not just traveling through space, they're creating shortcuts, jumping across thousands of light years in a single step. That's how they're moving so fast. The implications were staggering. If the moths could create stable gateways, they could appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Earth's defenses, concentrated in the outer system, would be useless against an enemy that could bypass them entirely. The moths could appear in Earth's solar system, begin feeding on the sun, and complete their consumption before the defense fleet could respond. But there was something else. The gateway wasn't just a transport mechanism, it was a communication device. As the portal stabilized, Zara's instruments detected a signal emanating from the other side. A complex pattern of electromagnetic radiation that carried the unmistakable signature of intelligence. "Someone's talking to them," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone on the other side of the gateway is giving them instructions." Kellerman's expression hardened. "Record everything. We need to get this information back to the task force." But as the Shadowrunner began its retreat, the moth's behavior changed. The creatures that had been focused on feeding suddenly turned, their attention outward, their wings creating new interference patterns that swept across the system like searchlights. One of the beams passed directly through the Shadowrunner's position, and Zara felt the ship shudder as its stealth systems struggled to maintain concealment. "They know we're here," Kellerman said, his hands moving across the control panels. With practiced efficiency, the gateway is amplifying their senses. They can detect quantum fluctuations in space-time. The moths were moving now, abandoning their feeding formation to pursue the intruder. They moved through space with impossible speed, their wings generating electromagnetic fields that disrupted the Shadowrunner's propulsion systems. The ship's bioorganic hull began to change color, shifting from dark gray to deep red as it adapted to the new threat. "What's happening to the ship?" Zara asked. "Emergency protocols. The hull is preparing for combat mode, but we can't fight them, not 3,000 of them. We need to transmit our data and hope the task force can make sense of it." The transmission burst lasted 3.7 seconds, compressed data containing everything the Shadowrunner's sensors had recorded. The signal raced across space at the speed of light, carrying with it the key to humanity's survival or the confirmation of its doom. But before the transmission could be confirmed received, the moths were upon them. The first moth to reach the Shadowrunner was smaller than the others, its wings spanning only a few hundred meters instead of kilometers. It moved with predatory grace, its body undulating through the vacuum as it approached the fleeing ship. When it struck, the impact was like colliding with a mountain of living energy. The Shadowrunner's hull absorbed the blow, its bioorganic material rippling like water. But the moth's attack wasn't physical. It was energetic, a concentrated beam of electromagnetic radiation that attempted to drain the ship's power systems. The organic hull responded by channeling the energy into specialized storage organs, converting the attack into fuel for the ship's defenses. "The ship is feeding on their energy," Kellerman explained as more moths closed in. "It's using their own power against them, but there are limits. Too much energy and the hull will overload." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded military history. The Shadowrunner twisted through space, its bioorganic hull shifting and adapting to each new attack. The moths pursued with relentless determination, their wings creating energy fields that could have powered entire star systems. But they were also learning, adapting their tactics with each failed assault. "They're getting smarter," Zara observed, watching the tactical display as the moths began to coordinate their attacks. "They're not just hunting us, they're studying us. That's what makes them dangerous. They're not just predators, they're intelligent predators, and they're sharing information through that gateway." The Shadowrunner's hull was beginning to show signs of strain. The bioorganic material was glowing with stored energy, its surface temperature rising to dangerous levels. Kellerman's hands moved across the controls, balancing power distribution. To prevent a catastrophic overload while maintaining the ship's defenses, "We need to break contact," he said. "The hull can't absorb much more energy." But breaking contact meant abandoning the mission area, leaving the gateway active and operational. The moths would complete their feeding, consume the star, and use the energy to open more gateways. The invasion would accelerate, spreading across the galaxy like a plague of living darkness. "What if we don't run?" Zara asked. "What if we use their own tactics against them?" Kellerman looked at her with genuine surprise. "What do you mean?" "The moths create resonance patterns to amplify their energy absorption. What if we created a counter-resonance, something that would disrupt their coordination? The Shadowrunner's hull is already overloaded. Adding more energy would destroy us. Not adding energy, redirecting it. The moths are pouring energy into us faster than the hull can process it. What if we channeled that energy into a focused beam and directed it at the gateway?" The plan was insane, desperate, and probably suicidal, but it was also the only option that offered any chance of success. Kellerman began rerouting the ship's power systems, channeling the energy being absorbed from the moth's attacks into the Shadowrunner's main sensor array. The bioorganic hull responded by growing new conduits, creating a network of energy channels that converged on the ship's forward section. "This is going to hurt," Kellerman warned. "The hull isn't designed to channel this much energy. It's going to feel like being struck by lightning. Do it. The energy discharge was visible across the system, a brilliant beam of concentrated starlight that lanced out from the Shadow Runner toward the gateway. The beam struck the portal's focal point with the force of a directed supernova, and for a moment, the gateway's structure began to collapse. The moth's coordinated formation broke apart, as their energy source was disrupted, but the portal was more resilient than they had hoped. The gateway absorbed the energy beam, using it to strengthen its own structure. The signal from the other side grew stronger, and more moths began to emerge from the portal, not dozens, but hundreds. The swarm was being reinforced. It's not working, Zara said, watching the tactical display as more moths poured through the gateway. The portal is too stable. It's designed to absorb energy attacks. Then we need to attack something else. The moths aren't just feeding on the star. They're using its gravitational field to anchor the gateway. What if we destabilized the star itself? The idea was breathtaking in its audacity. If they could trigger a premature stellar collapse, the resulting gravitational waves would shatter the gateway's anchor point. The portal would collapse, trapping the moths on the wrong side of the galaxy, but causing a star to collapse required precise manipulation of its nuclear processes. And they had only one chance to get it right. The star is already weakened from the moths feeding, Zara said, running calculations on her datapad. Its fusion reactions are barely stable. If we could introduce a resonance frequency that disrupts the nuclear processes, the Shadowrunner's hull is still overloaded with energy. If we channel it into a gravitational pulse and direct it at the star's core, they had seconds to act. The moths were closing in, their electromagnetic fields creating interference patterns that would soon overwhelm the Shadowrunner's defenses. Kellerman's hands moved across the controls, reconfiguring the ship's energy systems one final time. The bioorganic hull began to glow with stored power, its surface temperature rising to levels that would have vaporized conventional materials. Energy discharge in 3.2.1. The gravitational pulse that emerged from the Shadowrunner was invisible to the naked eye, but its effects were immediate and devastating. The dying star's core, already weakened by the moth's feeding, responded to the artificial gravitational wave by accelerating its collapse. Nuclear fusion ceased abruptly, and the star's outer layers began to fall inward. Under their own gravity, the stellar collapse created a cascade of gravitational waves that rippled through spacetime, shattering the gateway's anchor point and destabilizing the portal. The moths caught in the gateway's collapse were pulled back through the portal, their energy signatures vanishing as the dimensional rift sealed itself. The remaining moths in the system found themselves cut off from their command structure, their coordinated behavior dissolving into confusion and panic. But the victory came at a cost. The Shadowrunner's hull had been pushed beyond its limits, its bioorganic structure beginning to break down under the strain of channeling so much energy. The ship's systems were failing, its exotic matter propulsion offline, its life support systems struggling to maintain atmosphere. We did it, Zara said, watching the tactical display as the moths scattered, their formation broken and their gateway destroyed. We actually did it. This is just the beginning, Kellerman replied, his voice tight with exhaustion. We destroyed one gateway, but there are others. The moths will adapt, find new ways to reach the core systems. This was just the first battle in a war that's going to last for generations. The Shadowrunner limped back to the rendezvous point, its hull scarred and its systems damaged but still functional. The data they had gathered was more valuable than any military victory. They had proven that the moths could be defeated, that their technology was not invincible. More importantly, they had identified the source of the invasion, an intelligence in the galactic core that was using the moths as weapons in a war that spanned millions of years. Admiral Hayes received their report with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The immediate threat to the Outer Rim colonies had been neutralized, but the larger war was just beginning. The coalition would need to develop new weapons, new strategies, new ways of thinking about warfare on a cosmic scale. What do you recommend, Colonel? She asked during the debriefing session. We need to go to the source, Kellerman replied. The intelligence that's controlling the moths is located in the galactic core. If we can find it, understand it, maybe, we can negotiate with it, or destroy it. That's a journey of 25,000 light years. Even with our faster ships, it would take decades to reach the core. Then we don't use our faster ships, we use their technology. The Moth's gateway system can be reverse-engineered, adapted for human use. We can learn to create our own shortcuts through spacetime. The proposal was ambitious beyond anything the Coalition had ever attempted, Building a gateway capable of transporting human ships across the galaxy would require resources from every inhabited world. The combined efforts of humanity's greatest scientists and engineers. It would be a project that would define the species for generations, but it was also the only path forward. The Moths would return, their numbers replenished and their tactics adapted to counter human defenses. The next invasion would be larger, more coordinated, and more devastating. Humanity's only hope lay in taking the fight to the enemy, in confronting the intelligence that had declared war on every living thing in the galaxy. Dr. Alina Vasquez was the first to volunteer for the deep space mission. Her xenobiology expertise would be crucial for understanding the alien intelligence they would encounter. Zara followed her astrophysics background, essential for navigating the hazardous regions around the galactic core. One by one, the Coalition's best minds committed themselves to a journey that would take them farther from home than any human had ever traveled. Kellerman's ship would serve as the expedition's guide, its bioorganic hull and exotic matter drives, providing protection against the cosmic hazards that surrounded the galactic core. The Shadowrunner had been damaged in the battle with the Moths, but its self-repair systems were already beginning to restore its capabilities. The ship seemed to learn from each encounter, its bioorganic structure evolving to meet new challenges. The ship is alive, Kellerman explained during one of their planning sessions, not in the way we understand life, but it's a living system. It grows, adapts, learns. The technology I used to build it came from species that understood the universe differently than we do. They saw the line between organic and mechanical as an artificial distinction. The Gateway project consumed the Coalition's resources for 3 years. Every inhabited world contributed materials, expertise, and personnel. The construction took place in the empty space between star systems, where the Gateway's exotic matter field generators wouldn't interfere with planetary ecosystems. The device that emerged from humanity's collective effort was a marvel of engineering, a ring of crystalline structures 3 kilometers in diameter that bent spacetime according to principles that had been theoretical until the Moths provided a practical demonstration. The first test was conducted with an unmanned probe, a simple device equipped with sensors and a communication array. The probe vanished into the Gateway's event horizon and reappeared 3 hours later, having traveled 15,000 light-years in an instant. Its data showed that the Gateway technology worked, but also revealed the true scale of the challenge they faced. The galactic core was a maelstrom of stellar activity, with massive black holes and dense star clusters creating gravitational fields that could tear apart conventional spacecraft. The region was also saturated with high-energy, radiation, and exotic matter streams that would be lethal to human physiology. Reaching the source of the Moth's signals would require technology that could survive conditions that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. "We're not just traveling to the galactic core," Zara observed during the final mission briefing. "We're traveling to a completely different kind of universe. The physical laws that govern matter and energy in that region are fundamentally different from what we experience here. Which is why we need the Shadowrunner," Admiral Hayes replied. "Kellerman's ship has already proven that it can adapt to exotic environments. It's our best chance of surviving the journey." The expedition fleet that assembled around the Gateway was small but sophisticated. The Shadowrunner would serve as the primary exploration vessel, accompanied by 2 Coalition science ships equipped with the most advanced sensor arrays humanity could produce. The mission parameters were simple: locate the source of the Moth's command signals, attempt to establish communication, and if communication failed, find a way to destroy the intelligence that was orchestrating the invasion. The journey through the Gateway was unlike anything in human experience. The expedition fleet entered the event horizon as discrete ships, but emerged as something else. Their matter reorganized by the passage through folded spacetime. The Shadowrunner's bioorganic hull protected its crew from the worst effects of the dimensional transition, but the Coalition ships suffered significant damage to their electronic systems. "We're not in our galaxy anymore," Zara said, studying the sensor readings from the Shadowrunner's observation deck. "I mean, we're still in the Milky Way, but we're in a region where the normal rules don't apply. The star density here is 50 times higher than in the outer rim. The gravitational interactions are creating stable wormholes, temporal distortions, regions where spacetime is folded into impossible configurations. The galactic core was beautiful and terrifying, a cosmic metropolis where stars burned in colors that had no names and matter existed in states that defied classification. But it was also inhabited. The expedition's sensors detected artificial structures scattered throughout the region, constructions that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. space stations the size of planets, star-sized machines that harvested energy from black holes, networks of crystalline structures that spanned entire star systems. The moths aren't the apex predators here, Kellerman observed. They're just one species among many. The galactic core is home to civilizations that have existed for millions of years, species that have mastered technologies we can barely comprehend. The source of the moth's command signals was located at the very center of the galaxy, in orbit around the supermassive black hole that anchored the galactic structure. The object was artificial, a construction of living metal and crystalline energy that pulsed with the rhythm of a cosmic heartbeat. It was vast beyond comprehension, its surface area larger than Earth's solar system. It's not a machine, Dr. Vasquez said, studying the bioscans from the Shadowrunner's sensors. It's a creature, a single organism that's been growing for millions of years, feeding on the energy of the galactic core. The moths aren't its weapons, they're its antibodies. The revelation changed everything. The invasion wasn't an act of aggression. It was an immune response. The creature at the galactic core had detected the spread of organic life throughout the galaxy and had responded by dispatching its antibodies to sterilize the infection. Humanity and every other species in the galaxy were seen as a threat to the cosmic ecosystem, but the creature was also intelligent, capable of communication and, potentially, negotiation. The challenge was establishing contact with a being whose consciousness spanned multiple star systems and whose thoughts operated on timescales measured in geological epochs. The Shadowrunner approached the creature slowly, its bioorganic hull adapting to the extreme gravitational fields and high-energy radiation that surrounded the galactic core. As they drew closer, the ship's sensors detected something unexpected. The creature was dying. It's been alive for millions of years, Zara explained, studying the energy readings from the creature's surface. But it's not immortal. The constant feeding, the energy expenditure required to maintain its size and control the moths across galactic distances, it's taking a toll. The creature is slowly consuming itself, which explains why it's become more aggressive, Kellerman added. It's not just trying to eliminate organic life. It's trying to harvest enough energy to survive. The moths aren't just antibodies. They're collectors, gathering the energy of entire star systems to feed their creator. The communication attempt began with mathematics, universal constants that any intelligent species would recognize. The Shadowrunner's sensors broadcast prime numbers, geometric sequences, and physical constants into the creature's electromagnetic field. The response was immediate and overwhelming, a flood of information that nearly overloaded the ship's data storage systems. The creature's thoughts were vast and ancient, shaped by millions of years of solitude and the responsibility of maintaining cosmic order. It had been created by an even older civilization, a species that had recognized the inherent instability of organic life and had designed a guardian to prevent galactic ecosystem collapse. The creature had fulfilled its purpose, for eons maintaining the balance between organic and inorganic matter throughout the galaxy. But something had changed. The organic species were evolving faster than the creature could adapt, developing technologies that threatened the fundamental structure of reality. The human's gateway technology, in particular, had been detected as an existential threat. The ability to fold spacetime could, if misused, create cascading dimensional collapses that would destroy not just the galaxy, but the entire local universe. It's trying to protect us, Zara said, her voice filled with wonder, not humanity specifically, but the universe itself. It sees our technology as a threat to cosmic stability. Then we need to prove that we're not a threat, Kellerman replied. We need to show that we can be responsible guardians of the galaxy. The negotiation that followed was unlike any diplomatic encounter in human history. The creature's consciousness was so vast that individual thoughts took hours to form, and its responses came in bursts of information that required days to decode. But gradually an understanding began to emerge. The creature was willing to call off the moths to allow organic life to flourish throughout the galaxy. But it required assurance that the organic species would not develop technologies that could threaten cosmic stability. In particular, it wanted guarantees that gateway technology would be used responsibly, under the supervision of species that had proven their commitment to galactic preservation. The terms of the agreement were complex, involving the establishment of a galactic council that would oversee the development of advanced technologies. Humanity would share its gateway technology with other species, but only under strict guidelines that prevented misuse. The creature would withdraw the moths, but would maintain monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. ready to respond if organic life once again threatened cosmic stability. "It's not the ending we expected," Admiral Hayes said during the final transmission from the expedition fleet, "but it's the ending we needed. We've gained not just survival, but a place in the galactic community. The knowledge we've acquired about the universe's structure, about the relationship between organic and inorganic matter, it will transform human science for generations." The return journey took 3 months, long enough for the expedition team to process the implications of what they had discovered. The galaxy was not empty space punctuated by islands of life. It was a complex ecosystem where organic and inorganic intelligence had co-evolved for millions of years. Humanity's rapid technological development had been perceived as a threat, but it had also demonstrated the species' potential for growth and adaptation. The Shadowrunner emerged from the gateway to find a galaxy transformed. The moths had withdrawn to the galactic core, their feeding grounds abandoned and their star-consuming swarms disbanded. The damaged stars were already beginning to recover, their nuclear fires rekindled by the release from the moth's energy drain. Life was returning to the Outer Rim colonies, and humanity was preparing to take its place in a galactic community that spanned thousands of species and millions of worlds. But the most significant change was in human perspective. The discovery of the galactic ecosystem had transformed humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. They were not alone, not unique, not the pinnacle of evolution. They were part of something larger, a cosmic community that had existed for eons and would continue to exist long after the last human had returned to Stardust. Zara Chen stood once again in the observation deck of the research station Meridian, watching the stars burn bright and steady in the darkness. But now she saw them differently. Each point of light was not just a nuclear furnace, but a component in a vast machine that maintained the structure of reality itself. The galaxy was alive, intelligent, and aware, and humanity had earned the right to be part of its story. The war with the moths had ended not with humanity's victory, but with its graduation. The species had proven that it could grow beyond its origins, that it could accept responsibility for powers that could reshape the universe. The galaxy had tested humanity and found it worthy of membership in the cosmic community. The stars burned on, eternal and patient, waiting to see what wonders and horrors the future would bring. And humanity, no longer alone in the darkness, prepared to face that future with the wisdom born of knowing that they were part of something infinitely larger than themselves. Rich Reiklord can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.